Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from Mason Works Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my friend Jan Holden. Hi, Jan. How are
Hi,
you?
Kathy. I'm good.
I'm so excited to introduce you to my audience. You are an amazing resource for people learning about near-death experiences and all of the publications. You've done 50 peer-reviewed publications, more than 100 international presentations, and you're also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Near-Death Studies. And your insights into after-death communications, near-death experiences, and other spiritual SPTs, STEs, which is what I've had. So,
Yeah.
so Jan, I just don't. I would love to know your story about your journey because you've dedicated decades of your life to this work. What started you on this journey?
Well, I just growing up, I was always interested in questions that were challenging to answer and phenomena that seemed to defy easy explanation. So I read books about um, like medical intuitives and mystical experiences and telepathy and all those sorts of things. And so I was always interested in these kind of topics. And then I got an undergraduate degree in psychology at the University of Illinois, which was completely about behaviorism, which is just about the opposite end of the spectrum, from all these transpersonal things. And but then when I ended up getting a master's and doctoral degree in counselor education at a university where there were a couple people on the faculty who were deep into the research on these phenomena. And so it gave me an opportunity to really explore them in a scholarly way, and such that when I had read Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, and in like 1978, he published it in 75, but I was a little late coming. And then in the mid 80s, I was working on my doctoral dissertation. And to make a very long story very short, I ended up doing the dissertation, a research study on something related to near-death experiences. And as soon as I did that research, a lot of people, after they do their doctoral dissertation, they don't want anything to do with the topic anymore. They're just sick of it. I was just the opposite, completely hooked. And even today, as a member of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, we get a monthly near-death experience in our email box. And one of our volunteers looks through our archives of NDE narratives and finds one that it's interesting for some reason, particularly interesting, and then sends it to us all. Even now, I could, no matter what I'm doing, when I see that in my mailbox, I almost always drop everything and read it, even after I have, read, heard, talked with like hundreds of near-death experiencers. I want to read yet another one. And so it's just an endlessly fascinating topic to me.
I agree. I'm also one of those people that as soon as I see the email come in, I do well, as long as I'm not in the middle of a meeting, I drop everything. I'm fascinated at the opportunity to learn the language of the ineffable.
Mm-hmm.
What I find just fascinating is that these people can bring that other world to our world so beautifully. There's so many people like Peter Panagore and others that their mystical language just cracks your heart open.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's wonderful. And it's funny, it's almost an oxymoron to talk about the language of the ineffable, because ineffable means you can't express it in language. And yet people, as you say, they somehow find a way, a lot of times with metaphors, or just trying to compare it to the closest thing we have on Earth, even though they'll say for sure this doesn't really do it justice. But they find a way. So I agree with you. That's a fascinating aspect.
Yes. And I also see that when I've been around near-death experiencers, we have a Boulder IANDS group that I love to help Jackie Arnold with. That there is a continuity of their awareness once they've become aware to the love that's available beyond, that they walk that path anymore. And so you can almost follow them. You can model their behavior, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, we know now from decades of research about the after effects of near-death experiences, and people do become more compassionate, more concerned about others, and it tends to influence every decision they make about how, especially if they've had a life review and they know that someday they're going to experience being on the receiving end of their own actions. It really affects them. That has affected me as well. Yeah, that's one of the, Ken Ring, one of the really premier researchers of NDEs, one of the early researchers, talked about learning about near-death experiences as a benign virus, that it's like a benevolent, you catch the benevolence of NDEs by learning about them. So and of course, as you know, at the IANDS conference, which we hold once a year, usually on Labor Day weekend, being around all these people who've had not only near-death experiences, but other transpersonal experiences, there's an energetic something there that is almost palpable. And very often we talk after the conference about the grief of leaving the conference, that it's such a high, and then to come back to, real life, it's sort of a letdown. But something, that we just look forward to every year.
Well, I love the whole energy, and I a lot of times equate it to going to Sedona and going into one of those vortexes, because you walk into this space and see so clearly and feel so clearly. Of course, I'm really sensitive, but you walk into it and it's like a bubble, and everyone's family. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it is.
I want to ask you, since you've been doing this research of near-death experience most of your adult life, what are you finding that's new with the near-death or after-death communication, or the research around it? Could you share a little bit about developments?
Sure, sure. Well, as you know, in near-death experiences, people often meet deceased loved ones. So that's after-death communication. It's embedded in many near-death experiences. So, I'm like, as with the purpose of IANDS to explore near-death experiences and related phenomena. I'm into all of those. Which, by the way, I call transpersonal, and I prefer that term to something like spiritually transformative experience, because some people have experiences like this and they're not spiritually transformed. And some people have experiences like this and they bristle at the label spiritual. It just doesn't fit with their worldview. So I like the word transpersonal, because in all of these experiences, near-death experiences, after-death communication, telepathy, past life memories, precognition, like knowing the future, the person in some way transcends the usual personal limits of space, time, identity, and influence. So normally, here I am in this skin encapsulated body, and my sense is that I'm isolated and I'm perceiving things in the outside world and there's this separation and all that. Well, and I'm limited in space to perceiving what's in my environment or available to my senses anyway, and limited in time to knowing only the now. Just what happened 15 seconds ago is the past. What's about to happen in the next 15 seconds is the future. All I have is now. Well, in these experiences, somehow those limitations are transcended. And I might, for example, know the future, remember something from a past life, be able to know something that's happening at a remote location, and leave my body, perceive the environment from a completely different perspective. Usually up above is what most near-death experiencers say. And so transpersonal means transcending the usual personal limits of space, time, identity, or influence. So I like the word because if somebody still wants to call their experience spiritual, they can, but they don't have to. And it's just a very neutral and very inclusive term. So anyway, from NDEs, I got interested in after-death communication, and as I mentioned before, I'm trained as a counselor, and so one of the newer things that's happening is a counseling technique called induced, induced after-death communication. And this is a counseling technique for people who are grieving. And what happens is essentially the worst aspect of the grief is worked through. And then about half of people, once they work through that, spontaneously have an after-death communication with the person they're grieving. And if they don't, we ask an additional question. It's not a leading question. The question is, if there were only one thing you could say to your deceased loved one, what's the single most important thing you would want to say to them? And then they process that in this special way. And another 30% of people have an after-death communication. And when we already know from the study of spontaneous after-death communication that it's very common, it's unrelated to mental disorder, it's pretty much an equal opportunity experience, men and women, young and old, people of all cultures, and all that. And it's very healing. It heals grief, and if somebody already believes in the afterlife and they have an after-death communication experience, it reinforces that belief. If they don't already believe in an afterlife, most people shift after an after-death communication to believing because they now know that their loved one continues to exist in a state of well-being, that their emotional bond continues even though their relationship has changed, and that they will see that person again someday when it's their time to pass into this next level of existence. So this counseling technique, licensed mental health professionals are supposed to use techniques that have been researched and verified as effective. Now I did the first study comparing IADC to traditional grief counseling and found that IADC was significantly more helpful to people with a very large treatment effect, just 2 90-minute sessions. It's an incredibly powerful technique. And now there's also been a study in Italy and one in Australia. And each of the studies was done a little differently, but they each got significant improvement in grief symptoms from IADC, and that it's more effective than like no treatment or traditional treatment or that sort of thing. So it's I've heard different counselors talk about ways that they facilitate their clients to have after-death communication experiences as part of their counseling, and that's all fine. But IADC is the only technique I know that's been actually researched. So it's the one that's legally and ethically safest for counselors to use in their practices.
Oh, that's fantastic. How long have you been using this? Or did you create it or you created it with,
Yeah.
it almost sounded like you
Uh,
did.
yeah, a psychologist named Al Botkin was working with the Veterans Administration in Chicago
Perfect.
and working with veterans who had PTSD. And he was using the technique that's most commonly used to help people process traumatic memories, which is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And he was using this with the veterans. And one day, just long story short, he stumbled upon his client having an after death communication, which was not even part of Al was a very traditional psychologist, and this wasn't even part of his worldview. But this patient, after having the ADC during their session, was like cured of his trauma, and he was released within a week because and he attributed it to not all the other EMDR that he'd done, but that specific technique. So that got Al very interested, and again, longer story shorter, he ended up really pursuing this and refining it and developing a protocol that he could train other counselors to use. And so his first presentation on this was, I believe, it was at our last Chicago IANDS conference, which I think was in 2000 or something like that, maybe it was 2010. And so shortly after that, I went up to Chicago and I brought three of my students who qualified to be trained in this approach. And we all got trained by Al. And then we came back here and we actually met here. This is my home office and practiced on each other. And then started using it in our private practices. But not long after that, I became a department chair at the university. I was on faculty at the University of North Texas all these years. And I became department chair and I had to give something up. So I gave up my private practice. So I stopped using it like individually myself, but I still have, of course, a lot of colleagues and who use it extensively. So yeah.
That sounds fantastic because that's so important, especially with the changes that we're trying to go through as humanity evolves for all of us to clear the pathways of past trauma, whether it's this life or other lives or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
have another question for you. Since you're in academia and you are very well versed in mainstream science, how have you noticed a change in how mainstream science and academia views the after death communication and NDEs now compared to when you first began your research?
Yeah, I would say that there's been some change. It's gradual because people who are steeped in a materialist worldview just dismiss these topics out of hand. So they don't even take the time to look at the unbelievably extensive research that's been done on all of these phenomena and that is very convincing about the reality of them and their benefits for people, the fact that they're unrelated to mental disorder and things like that. So somebody who's really steeped in a worldview that the only important things to focus on are things that can be directly observed and measured. These transpersonal experiences are just outside of that domain. But I think there's a gradual movement, but it's still gradual. You know who really makes this shift is people who were steeped in materialism, who then had a near-death experience or an after-death communication experience, the experience shifts them. It's like now they get it. And so they're like, for example, Eben Alexander, who was a, Harvard neurosurgeon, had a profound near-death experience. And I remember the first time he spoke about it it was at an IANDS conference. And in his conclusion, he said, as a Harvard neurosurgeon with numerous peer-reviewed publications, presentations, all this kind of stuff, and years, he was on that faculty for years. He said, I thought I knew pretty much everything there was to know about the brain and consciousness. Now I take all that information, and it's this much in a vast universe. And he said, I never would have known this if I hadn't had my own experience. And the same is true of Mary Neal. She's an orthopedic surgeon up in Wyoming, I believe. And she had her near-death experience in a drowning episode, and it just completely changed her worldview as well. So actually, on my list, my to-do list, is to write a book about physicians who've had near-death experiences, because every year Gallup does a poll where they ask Americans what professions they trust. And doctors, physicians, and nurses always come out in the top 5. And so because physicians are so respected, I think their stories about how their NDEs just completely shifted their worldviews. If you read one after the other, I think it can have a particular kind of impact. So I'm hoping to get to that before I pass into that other realm.
Well, I love all of this because I really feel that the more you start reading, I probably have read 100 near-death experiencer books, and it wasn't that I wanted to have that experience. I've had the spiritually transformative, or now transpersonal experience, which it does sound better because the other sounds, STE sounds like a disease.
Yeah, it rhymes with a disease, right?
But what I'm always fascinated with is how people integrate those otherworldly experiences, whether it's I did a wonderful interview with Scott Taylor and David Morris and me, and all 3 of us have had a different version. Scott had a shared experience, which, wow. Yeah. And, a lot of this is like, how do you integrate this when you come back to this reality? And lots of people didn't even share theirs for 20 to 40 years because they were afraid of the consequences. Do you think that people are a lot more receptive now about this? I mean, I feel that there's a thirst for knowledge now with it. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I think that the general public is becoming gradually better educated about these phenomena. And definitely I see that thirst, that hunger for knowing about dimensions of existence beyond this physical world. And that because it relates so much to a sense of meaning and purpose in life, like why are we here? If you just think that you're some kind of creature that evolved and is just going to live and die, and that's all there is, it makes life kind of flat. If you have a sense, a knowing, especially if you have a direct experience and a knowing that there is more than this material world, and certainly what we even perceive of the material world, it brings a depth and meaning to life and to work. That as you well know, near-death experiencers tend to come back saying that the single most important thing in earthly life is to use this lifetime to advance in our capacity to love. And if we imagine what the world would be if everybody made that their foremost, the thing foremost in their mind every day when they wake up, when they go through the day, their interactions, their decisions from uh, everything from interpersonal moments all the way up through, what is our company going to do? What is our country going to do? If love were the primary motive, and then, of course, it's important to define love. Different people define it different ways, but for me, it's the awareness of the um, godliness in each of us and the commitment to each person's well-being, their surviving and thriving. And if I treasure you and know that, and my intention is for your well-being, for you to survive and thrive, and that's my motivation at every level of life. What a different world we would live in. So it brings immediate more meaning to life, but also a greater sense of purpose and a challenge about how to really use life to our best purpose and our best benefit.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Um, so Mark Anthony wrote the Afterlife Frequency, and Dr. Jeffrey Long has also a research group, and they're finding frequency as part of the conversation. Could you share a little bit about your insights into that?
Actually, I haven't focused so much on frequency,
Oh, okay.
although I will say that in after death communication, the sense that I get is that, and this I'm sure relates to what you're talking about, that when we're in physical life and we're really focused on this physical level, there's an energetic or frequency level that's relatively lower. And when we lose our physical body and continue to exist in a non-physical state, our energetic level or frequency level changes, and I'm going to say rises. And so it's challenging for entities at different levels to communicate with each other. And one of the things we've learned through induced after death communication is that a lot of what we're doing, we're not actually inducing after death communication. It's a completely false misnomer. All we're doing is helping the person to release anything that's lowering their kind of energetic level, their vibration, so that they're at their highest possible level, and that makes them more accessible to other to non-physical entities who want to communicate. So it's like we have to meet them have part way anyway. And certainly if we're preoccupied with anger, with regret, with guilt, with even grasping after the connection is something that pulls us down, actually. And so if we can get into this state of consciousness in which we're like calm, there's equanimity, there's an invitation and an openness and a receptivity and patience and willingness to receive communication in the way that the non-physical entity can bring it out off, um, that's what maximizes the likelihood that that experience will happen. So that's the only real context in which I've thought very much about frequency and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. I just wondered because I thought the left brain audience would bridge the science with spirituality, which hopefully is the path we're on right now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I have another question for you. As editor of the Journal of Near-Death Studies, you have front row to the research and all the stories of global research. What patterns or common threads do you see across different cultures?
Yeah. Um, well, I don't know if you are know about Gregory Shushan, who's a near-death experience researcher who has specialized in finding uh, like the most hidden accounts of near-death experiences from ancient history and across cultures. So he has studied near-death experiences throughout history and across cultures. And independently, he and I have come to the same conceptualization. And the way that I say it is that I see near-death experiences at three levels. There's a relatively universal level. It doesn't mean that each of these features is present in every NDE, but you see these features repeated throughout cultures. And they're very basic phenomena, such as the experience of meeting deceased loved ones or other spiritual entities. There's often, at some point in a near-death experience, rapid movement through some non-material space, and that's a common feature. And even seeing a tunnel is often, it's not in every culture, but it's in many cultures. And so there's this level of these repeated motifs that occur across culture throughout history. They really seem to be universal with humans. And then those are inevitably experienced and expressed through a person's cultural filter. So for example, let's just take the example of a rapid movement through a tunnel or an enclosure. And a lot of Western near-death experiencers just talk about a tunnel and moving rapidly, or through, or not necessarily a tunnel, but moving rapidly even through space. Well, there's, for example, a Maori that's a native New Zealander talks in her NDE about flying over Aotearoa, which is the Maori name for New Zealand, toward the leaping off place of souls. So there was still rapid movement through this non-physical, in this non-physical condition, but it took a cultural, a cultural form. And then there's a third and final level, and that is even within the same culture, individuals will report this something different. If you go to, for example, you mentioned Jeff Long's NDERF, Near Death Experience Research Foundation website, and just search for the word tunnel and read one account after another. No two people describe this tunnel the same way. For some, the tunnel is made of light. For some, the tunnel is dark with light at the end. Even if it's made of light, sometimes the light is white, sometimes it's colored, sometimes the light, changes. Sometimes there are other entities in the tunnel, other times not. And so I've never found two descriptions of the tunnel that were exactly alike. So for everybody, even the tunnel, which is so common, it's unique. And so, for example, there's a little boy, Debbie James tells the story of a little boy who had a near-death experience, and he said, and then I went really fast through a giant noodle. So for him, the tunnel was a noodle. And then a guy who was a trucker said, then I whizzed through this tailpipe, this gigantic tailpipe. So he sees the tunnel as a tailpipe. And then there are other people who will just say that it's a tunnel or it's a passageway that is tunnel-like or something like that. So there are these levels. So we know that there is some universality and also cultural and individual expressions of those universal motifs.
Thank you. I love that. And I'm so excited that there is some way for people to feel comfortable that after 40 plus years, we've got Dr. Raymond Moody's work was 50 years ago, but IANDS has been doing this work. International Association for Near-Death Studies has been doing this work for over 40 years. And you have some very prestigious partners in this research. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience as president and the heartfelt experience, hopefully, is what you're going to share, of being with this such a profound new field, because it's fairly young, but the benefits and what you're seeing that it's doing.
Yeah, well, it really has been one of the very top privileges of my life to serve as IANDS president. And because, as you know, probably the single most important thing we do is create a space for people who've had transpersonal experiences to be able to find resources and other people that they can talk with who really understand them. And I also have, for almost 20 years now, led a local IANDS group that meets once a month. And the thing I hear most often from people is they say, I can talk about things in here that I can't talk about out there. Because people just don't understand if they don't have some kind of resonance with these sorts of experiences. They are experiences of another dimension. And it can be really challenging to try to explain something from another dimension to somebody who just doesn't relate to it at all. And so we are a community of many people who have experienced different facets of these other dimensions and can talk with each other and feel really understood. And so that's, I think, like a huge benefit. People can feel very isolated if they have this experience and don't realize that they're not alone. And so back to what you were saying before about these things becoming better known. I think that's happening less, but it still happens. I still find people who they've just discovered IANDS, they've looked into all this information, they're like, oh my gosh, all these years I've been alone with my experience or experiences, and now I have community. But we also are interested and dedicated to, it's part of our mission to support research and education, as well as support for people who've had near-death and related experiences. So the organization is like 99% volunteer. People are, I think, because these experiences, many people say that these experiences are the most meaningful of their lives. It generates a lot of motivation for them to want to contribute to anything that advances our understanding and our understanding of the experiences and of each other and that sort of thing. So we have really committed volunteers, and it's amazing what this group of volunteers does. I mean, we put on this huge conference. This year's conference is coming up in just a couple, 3 weeks. We already have over 750 people registered for it. And we usually get, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, it'll be over 800 before we're done. It might be even up toward 850. So it's a lot a lot of people. And then we also, in addition, we reach people online who can't come physically to this year. It'll be in the Chicago area. And so putting on this conference is huge, and it's been done all these years by volunteers. Putting out the journal with volunteers, and I have an editorial board of volunteers who help me review all the article submissions that we get and that sort of thing. And Oh, and our local groups, we have like, I think now over 100 local groups in the US, some in Europe, and a few we even have like one in Iran and a few in other parts of the world. All of those run by volunteers reaching out to people in their local communities who have these kinds of experiences. So I mean, it's a sprawling organization with all these different activities going on, and virtually all of it supported by volunteers. It's really inspiring. And like I said, it's been, one of the great honors of my life to serve as president.
That's fabulous. And I've been a volunteer, I think, for 6 years. And I have loved everyone just about that I've met through it. And I just want to encourage people that if you have a loved one that's struggling during these changing times with the energy, maybe they're highly sensitive person, or they may have PTSD. We do have so much to offer to so many communities. The past president, Colonel Diane Cochran, did so much work to bring near-death experience training to the nurses in the Army as a colonel, because she felt that PTSD was misdiagnosed, NDEs, excuse me, was misdiagnosed as PTSD, and that was causing the suicide rate to come up. So behind the scenes, IANDS has been at the forefront of so many things that'll help us through these changing times. And I want to thank you so much, Jan, for your leadership and the brilliant light that you bring to it. I'd love to show the site real quick so we could talk to it. Would you mind doing that real quick?
Sure, that's fine.
I bring it up for you, and let's see. Oops, it's not showing. 1 second.
Okay.
Let me try again.
That's a really good idea that to help people
have a visual.
Yeah, have a visual of the site.
Okay, there you go. So I'll let you talk. I'll just navigate.
Okay, there. Yeah. And yeah, this is great. So this is a lot about the conference and our keynote speakers and the books that each of them has the most recent book that each of them has published. And then across the top, well, this is really on our conference website.
Site.
Yeah, which is great. And then we also have a main page. I don't know if you can get back to the main page of IANDS.
Oh, you want me to go to the home page of IANDS?
Yeah, well, what do you think? Do you think
okay. Well, I do want to just for a few minutes to go through this, because I want people to know that if they cannot come in person, the energy is palpable even in the recordings. And you can buy a ticket. It's very reasonably priced to do the online following, and lots of the whole presentations and panels are going to be recorded. And instead of watching Netflix for hours, for weeks, you can watch this, and it will transform you. The energy and the love that these people bring is palpable. It's quite remarkable. And having Dr. Raymond Moody, who wrote his book 50 years ago, there's a documentary about his life that's going to be shown. And then to have Carolyn Mist, who's amazing medical intuitive, Bruce Grayson, who has been in IANDS as a researcher. He wrote, I have that book, I have that book, I have that book, I have that book. Anyway, Diane Hennessy Powell, who is now being featured everywhere because of the work with the telepathy tapes, which if you don't know anything about them, you will be so amazed at that whole work that she does with children and the telepathy that is available in our new emerging species, the new human. Mm-hmm. And Mark Anthony, as I mentioned before, the afterlife frequency, he is a fourth generational medium who was a lawyer, and amazing cast of people. And this is just the keynotes. There's over 100 amazing speakers. So I just wanted to make sure people know you want to go there, but if you can't get there in person, the next opportunity is to do yourself a favor and get the audios and be part of that. So now, Jan, I should be able to share the main site.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that because you're it is helpful, I think, for people to realize how extensive the conference program is. And yeah, so this is the IANDS main page, and you can get to that conference site that you were just on, Kathy, from here. But this also shows, like we at the top of the page, there are drop-down menus about if you want to learn about NDEs, if you want to have support, if you want to learn about research, about IANDS itself, about our various communities and media resources. It's just rich with information, including our own collection of over, I believe I can't remember how many it's hundreds of near-death experience accounts that you can read at our website, much like you can read at the NDERF website. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and the site's beautiful. They just redid it. It's so nice and clean.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's IANDS.org, IANDS, which stands for International Association for Near-Death Studies. And we invite all of you, I think once you start experiencing the YouTubes, if you're not if you're a reader like I am, I'm a bookaholic, you'll be fascinated by the accounts that people have had and the opportunity to not have to have a near-death experience, but to have the transformation. Because we're not saying that everyone has to have that to evolve and to show up as more love and to learn to love themselves really is a big part of this journey. But the opportunity to be a part of this, which I believe is the wave, that's how we're going to evolve to the new human, I hope.
Yeah, me too. Fingers crossed, right?
Well, I think I hope everyone will make an effort to experience some of the content that's been collected over all these years. Again, this is a rare opportunity where you have researchers and experiencers all donating. That usually you have one or the other, and it's a scientific study, like you're a specimen, whereas this is the combination and the support for both groups of people, and it's amazing. It's amazing what you've done. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, well, and as you say, I'm part of a very larger community of people who've been conducting research and experiencers who've dedicated themselves to sharing their experiences so that we can learn what there is to know from studying numbers of experiences and seeing the similarities between them, the uniquenesses of each of them, and all that. So it's been a wonderful journey. And I guess I'd also like to take a minute for people who are especially interested. You know, near-death experiences are private, subjective experiences, feel absolutely real or realer than real to the experiencer. But for somebody who hasn't had one, there can still be the question, is that all it is? Is this very meaningful subjective experience? Well, one of the areas that I've been researching since the beginning is a phenomenon called veridical perception, where something in that the person perceived in the near-death experience, they couldn't have known through any normal way. They could only know by having been like out of their body and seeing a perspective that wasn't available even to their physical body. And it's later verified as accurate. And in many cases, the person that verifies it is the physician who was caring for a patient who had a near-death experience like this. Anyway, these cases of veridical perception have been collected into a book called The Self Does Not Die, which is an IANDS publication. Are you going to have it right there that you're going to flash in front of us? No? Okay. And it's beautiful. It has a big pink tulip on the front. And I think for people who are interested to know, are these even more than the most meaningful, real, subjective experiences of people's lives? Might they be objectively real? That when a person says they saw something in their NDE that was not known to any living person, but then was later verified as accurate, it's like, wow. And reading one case after another, it's very impactful. So I just wanted to highlight that option for people who are interested in that particular angle. There it
Now
is.
I
You
found
got
it,
it.
and I've talked to Bob before,
Yes.
and that was very interesting. And then
Uh-huh.
here is the book that you
That's right.
mentioned.
That's right. There it is.
Wonderful. And this
Yeah,
is on the books published by IANDS page
that's
on
right.
the site.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure there's so many. Seriously, for people that love to read like me, that get immersed in the information and somehow
Yeah.
eat it like food. Um,
Yeah. It is.
that's the book. So
Yep.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
easy to have a little bit of a way to see it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you,
we
Kathy.
want to make sure that you follow what Jan's doing. So, Jan, your presidency ends coming up, right?
That's right. Our bylaws require after 6 years that a person rotate off the board, and that means rotating also out of any officer position. So I'll be finishing up. Actually, our new president, Evan Meekum, is probably going to assume primary responsibility, some like October, November, and I'll still stay on the board for the last few months, but then come February, I'll be off, and then he'll take over and continue on.
And
So
then you can write your book.
yes, I need to write that book and another. There's another one on my to-do list as well. So I've got
Okay.
plenty to keep me busy.
Well, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for being such a bright light for IANDS. And so many of us have benefited over the years by the community and the intelligent presentation of everything. It is not hard to grasp, and there's a very grounded aspect of it, which makes the information very usable. And again, I had a experience 20 some years ago with no help with integration, and I know the difference. So I'm hoping there's so many people right now that could be waking up to realizing that they've had an experience. Either they were in the hospital and they were resuscitated and they're now coming, the memories are coming available. This is the perfect place to be. If you've had those experiences, you will get so much loving support and a way to integrate fully who you are.
Yeah. Well
Yeah.
said.
Thank
Thank you, Kathy, for
you.
very much for your contribution to all this. You've been a light yourself.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
It's my pleasure. I feel this is family. And I am so glad that Jackie Arnold introduced me to all of it and got me to be her helper while she was on the board. So, yeah,
Right.
It's been a great journey. So, everyone, again, please go to IANDS.org. And from there, you can get the link to the conference if you're interested. This is a once a year event. It is the main fundraiser for the whole organization. And as Jan said, most of the organization is supported by volunteers, but there are some overhead payments that this conference helps pay for. So your contribution of a membership or of buying the online event, if you can't get there in person, is really going to help the whole organization. So, and Jan, do you have any last words you'd like to leave us with?
No, I think we've covered a lot of really good stuff, and I just want to thank you again, Kathy, for inviting me.
Oh, sure. Well, we should have done this before, but anyway. Thank you, everyone. Please share this if you feel this could help your friends or family. And please go to those sites and really see what the gifts are for you. Thank you.